appears that once again, NATO has rejected Ukraine joining their force. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it or not, Zelensky is trying very hard here to get Ukraine to be a part of NATO. Well, NATO has rejected it again. This time, they have rejected Ukraine because, according to NATO, Ukraine is just too corrupt. Imagine that, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that. Too corrupt. Let's get into it from Telegraph. Ukraine to be told it is too corrupt to join NATO. Talk about putting it all out on the table. Just being open about the damn thing. Let's get into it here. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you guys can read along. Ukraine will be told it is currently too corrupt to join NATO in a major blow to Zelensky. The alliance will request additional steps from Kyiv before membership talks progress. And that's coming from a senior official from the U.S. State Department. I'm trying to do this story without laughing. The position will be set out in writing in the NATO communique to be signed at the Alliance Annual Summit on July 9th. We have to step back and applaud everything that Ukraine has done in the name of reforms over the last 2+ years, the official said to Telegraph. As they continue to make those reforms, we want to commend them. We want to talk about additional steps that need to be taken, particularly in the area of anti-corruption. It's a priority for many of us around the table, the source said. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is NATO and the State Department admitting what I've been saying and some of my comrades have been saying since the very start of this war, that Ukraine is very corrupt, that there's a lot of corruption in that country. Now, the question you need to start asking yourself is this. If the U.S. State Department can admit that, why are they okay with the U.S. government giving them funds? So you see, the State Department is admitting that the U.S. government is funding a corrupt country. What do you know, folks? Mr. Zelensky, Ukraine's president, is pushing for a swift NATO membership after the war ends to protect the future invasion. It would compel the U.S. and Europe to come to the defense of Kyiv in the event of any Russian attack. I want to highlight this again because this part is important. It does involve us. It would compel the U.S. and Europe to come to the defense of Kyiv in the event of any Russian attack. That means our troops, our tax dollars to go and fight in Ukraine. See, they've run out of soldiers in Ukraine. They've run out of people. This is why Zelensky now, in a more recent discussion, is saying that he wants to call for some type of negotiation because he said there's too many dead people. They've run out of people. So now they want to use our people. It goes on to here to say, but corruption has been a sticking point in recent talks between NATO member states over whether to offer Ukraine a concrete timetable for joining the Western military alliance. They had a poll here. Should Ukraine be allowed to join the NATO post-war? I wonder if it'll show my vote if I vote. Interesting. 56% say yes, 44% say no. Interesting. Telegraph recently revealed that the U.S. is blocking British and European efforts to put in writing an irreversible path towards NATO membership for Ukraine. Ukraine has suffered from corruption, particularly in its armed forces since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Mr. Zelensky has sacked military chiefs as part of an effort to curb the problem, especially in the area of defense procurement. I would say that Zelensky is part of the corruption. I don't know. That's just me, right? Like, okay, let's be real here. I don't think it's just in the armed forces. Joe Biden raised significant corruption in an interview with Time magazine this year, during which he ruled out supporting the NATOization of Ukraine. So now you have the State Department and the President of the United States admitting that Ukraine is corrupt. And since the very beginning of this war, when independent media has been telling you about the corruption in Ukraine. Corporate media has denied it at every turn. They said that we were misinformation. They said that we were Putin puppets. Remember the ways that they smeared like the gray zone, etc. So now you have the president of the United States saying the exact same thing that we've been telling you all along. NATO diplomats and officials have given Ukraine a list of reforms it will be expected to carry out before its membership ambitions can be realized. That's something NATO has been doing quietly under the radar that helps them get closer to membership. And I'm just going to tell you this much. If Ukraine joins NATO, Russia, I believe, is going to see that again as aggression from NATO. Because what did we tell you from the very beginning? NATO is not supposed to expand. So if NATO eventually accepts the membership of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is not going to be happy about that. You think he's just going to back down and say, oh, well, it is what it is? No. Once again, he's going to see that as NATO pushing upon his border. So I just think it's hilarious. I hope more people talk about this, that our State Department and our president and our government officials are admitting publicly that there is too much corruption in Ukraine for it to join NATO. Now, I think we can all argue that all those countries that are a part of NATO have some type of corruption. But what it says to the American people, and more people should be pushing back on this, is that they are taking federal dollars. They are taking money that could be used right here in the United States, and they are funding a corrupt country, and they're not even hiding it anymore. Nick had a really good summary about this. I wanted to show this because I love these hotspot videos from Nick and Nico. I want to show this one from my comrade Nick from RBN, and then we'll show Nico's as well.
At the upcoming NATO summit, Zelensky will be told that Ukraine will not join NATO because Ukraine is too corrupt. This is exactly what truth tellers was warning people about. The same thing that got us called Putin sympathizers. Why would you send hundreds of billions of dollars to one of the most corrupt countries in the world? Ukraine's corruption was something that the Western media used to report on in great detail before Russia's military operation. Ukraine is a country that banned oppositional political parties, banned oppositional media, and they banned workers' right to collective bargaining. And this is just scratching the surface. NATO is so dirty because they haven't just discovered Ukrainian corruption. They knew how corrupt Ukraine was. They just had no intention of ever allowing Ukraine to join NATO. What NATO did was hang over the promise of NATO membership over Ukraine's head in order to draw Russia into a war. So after sacrificing an entire generation of Ukrainian men, the response to NATO is thanks bro, but you're still not one of us. We appreciate your sacrifice though. What's even more messed up is that President Biden and NATO was very clear that their primary objective was not to protect Ukrainians, but to weaken Russia and boost the military-industrial complex. NATO in the West is also using Ukraine as a testing ground to see how well their weapons work. So the West killed peace deals and allowed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die for essentially a military-industrial complex pet project. So quick question for all the liberals with Ukrainian flags in their profile pictures. Why aren't they upset with how the West used Ukraine?
That is a very good point there from Nick. All the people that have the Ukraine flags in their bio on Twitter or on Facebook, aren't you? You should be upset about this, right? You should be upset that all those Ukrainian people died for nothing, because we told you from day one, there was no way they were going to be able to win this war. So this has just been a pet project of the United States government to try to find a way to weaken Russia. It has not weakened Russia. Whether you like Russia or not, that's just the facts. The sanctions that they have implemented on Russia have not hurt Russia at all. Russia's economy is doing just fine. And all those people died because the United States government wanted to try out this little project. We have a lot of war criminals in this country. I don't care if it's a Republican presidency or Democrat presidency. There are a lot of war criminals in this country, and they are never held accountable. Now, Nico also talks about this as well. He says Ukraine finds out they've lost hundreds of thousands of people fighting against Russia for absolutely no reason. This is so adorable, too, because Nico is like walking with his son. But listen to this.
So Ukraine has just been denied membership by NATO once again. And it was actually the U.S. State Department that said it's because they're too corrupt. And they're going to outline some things they need to do before Ukraine can join up with NATO. But here's the problem with that, y'all. The United States is the one who is drawing up the plans for them to combat corruption, for them to gain accession into NATO. But they're not too corrupt to train their neo-Nazis. They weren't too corrupt to arm them with bombs on top of bombs on top of bombs. They weren't too corrupt to give them tens of billions of US tax dollars. But they're for some reason too corrupt to give people or to get admission into NATO. I'm confused. And just out of curiosity, wasn't the whole reason this war started in Ukraine? Wasn't the whole reason because y'all kept making it seem like y'all were going to give accession into NATO, right? But what makes it crazier is that NATO announced, like yesterday, that they're actually going to put an official in Ukraine to make sure military aid can continue to go there, even if Trump wins the presidency. I'm just confused. So NATO, I just want y'all to know something. This is what it feels like. Well, no, not NATO, excuse me. Ukraine. This is what it feels like to be the side piece. When you never get a ring, you never get the commitment, okay? You get all the problems. You bear the burden of a long-term relationship, but you never get any other benefits. They're stringing you along. And the reason that your men have been sent to the meat grinder was because you were convinced that you were going to join NATO, and Russia was convinced that you were going to join NATO. But the only people who seem to not be convinced that you're going to join NATO is NATO. So maybe, just maybe, it would be a smart idea to stop fighting their war. And maybe Zelensky should take control of his damn government and save his people for once, instead of, sending them to their demise. I don't know. That's just me. That's what I would do in this situation, because clearly NATO don't want you. It's time to take a hint, bro.
Yeah, very clearly. And another thing that I think is important to say about this as well is I wonder what's going to happen in the future, because I really do believe that Zelensky, after all this is over with, I really do believe that Zelensky is going to leave Ukraine. I can't imagine him staying there, for year after all those people in Ukraine have died, after we've seen video footage of them dragging people off the street to go fight in this unwinnable war. I just can't imagine him staying there and just like, okay, I'm just going to continue to live in Ukraine. He's probably going to take the money that he has and go live somewhere else. And those people are going to be stuck, just struggling, because Ukraine's economy is done, son. Now, BlackRock said that they're going to try to invest in Ukraine. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. All of this for the West. All of this for the West and their pet project. Now, what's interesting is that Putin is waking up to the idea that Donald Trump could win presidency. And I want to show you what Vladimir Putin just said recently about having an end to this war, which he believes would come about if Donald Trump were to win the presidency. So listen to this. I will pause in between to read the captions for you, because I know sometimes some of you are driving and you may not be able to read the captions. So,
Вы знаете, то, что господин Трамп
the fact that Mr. Trump, as a presidential candidate,
как кандидат в президенты, заявляет о том, что он готов и хочет
declares that he is ready and wants to stop the war in Ukraine.
Остановить войну на Украине, мы к этому относимся вполне серьезно.
We take this quite seriously. I'm not familiar, of course, with his possible proposals.
Я не знаком, разумеется, с его возможными предложениями по поводу того, как он собирается это сделать.
Or how he intends to do this. And that's certainly the key issue. But
И это, конечно, ключевой вопрос. Но я не сомневаюсь, что он говорит это искренне.
I have no doubt that he's saying this sincerely, and we are going to support it. So what this says to me, it seems like, again, Donald Trump has said multiple times before that this war wouldn't have started if he was in office. I don't know. He also gave money to Ukraine too. It probably wouldn't have escalated to this point. But what it shows you is that Vladimir Putin, it sounds like he's willing to work with Trump if that is Donald Trump's ultimate goal. Now, I'm not for Trump or Biden, for those of you who are new, but listen to what Vladimir Putin is saying. Like, there needs to be a negotiation. You have to remember the US government and NATO declined any type of negotiation from the very beginning. They wanted this war. They wanted this to happen. We can say that Russia shouldn't have invaded, but we can also say that Russia was provoked and that Russia was quiet for years before they decided to really respond. So we also have to understand that if someone walks up to you and they're constantly poking you in the face and you're telling them, stop it, and they're poking you in the face for years and they still don't stop, eventually you're going to swat back. Eventually, you're going to show them these hands. So that's exactly what has happened here. And that's how we got into this situation. And we cannot ignore that. And what's really sad about this entire conflict is that so many people have died. So many people have died. And I don't feel that Ukraine will ever be the same again. They're talking about the corruption. Think about all the people that have died.